This is the Truth Booth, and I am your host, Gordy Tamayo. Welcome to the spot where we go head-to-head with some of the most difficult conversations. We're talking about the type that sometimes can't even be discussed at the dinner table, or not welcome in the institutional setting, or maybe can't even be discussed with the best friend. Everything from spirituality, sexuality, religion, politics, music, culture, family, and so much more. Get ready for some uncut and raw conversation that helps us get to the truth of the matter, because we believe that the truth will set you free. Let's get it. Ladies and gentlemen, what's happening? Thanks for jumping on and joining us here. Gordy Tamayo for another edition of the Truth Booth. And today, I'm super stoked to bring on the guest. We go way back, this brother and myself. And while I won't reminisce too much down memory lane and get myself in trouble, we are going to get into some conversations that are meant to enlighten you, are really meant to shed some light on some areas of life that maybe you haven't heard so much about. And we're talking about the street life. And while some may choose to believe that the street life looks like one thing in particular or another, we're going to actually bring you somebody who's actually lived that life and bring some truth to the matter, because sometimes it gets a little bit jaded, I would say, with pop culture, with media, entertainment. You know how that is. We get a little brainwashed sometimes when we just keep ourselves in front of a tube or in front of your phone, etc. And so I want to bring on a guest who's actually lived through this and could shed some light to hopefully set you free too, if that's you. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring on my boy here, none other than Tony Ramirez. And I'll wait for this to connect here. Can you see me there, Tony? There we go. It's
I'm here. It's cutting out a little bit on my end, I think.
Yeah. How you doing, brother?
It's cut out a little bit on my end. I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself, man?
I'm doing good, brother. Doing good.
Yeah,
so first of all, let me just for listeners so they know exactly where you're coming from. Where are you at right now? Where are you posted up at? Oh, I think we got a little bit of a connection issue going on. Can you hear me there?
Yeah, it's a bad connection, but I can hear you. It just keeps cutting off. It keeps coming off and off.
Yeah.
You don't mind if I hardwired it real quick? Let me just hardwire straight instead of the Wi-Fi connection. That's probably the problem.
Yeah, you're good,
Give me
bro.
1 second.
Yeah, I'll wait for you here for
I hate
just
to
a
disrupt
second.
I'll be right back real quick.
Yeah, no, you're good. All right. So while we're waiting for Tony to jump back on here, I didn't want to ruin the surprise a little bit, I guess you could say, because he's not stateside. And so he's a little bit away, and I'm not going to ruin the details of what that is, but that's part of the story that we're going to be telling. So hang tight for just a second, folks. As you're jumping on, I'm going to let you listen to something else other than me talk for just a moment while he gets set up, and we'll be right back with you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we got our guest on deck here. Tony, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Wow,
Yeah. Is that better?
man, I'm telling you, someone really does not want us to have this interview here or something because wow, it's just like all of a sudden, man. I usually have problems with the internet here, and it usually happens like on Christmas or on New
Uh,
Year's when I have my family down here. And it just happens, you know what I mean? It's just like strange,
really?
but oh wow.
Well, we're
Anyways,
gonna have,
I'm back.
yeah, we're gonna have the conversation. We're back. We're back at it. And I didn't get a chance to finish asking you, Tony, where are you posted up right now, by the way, for everybody listening? Where are you living?
I'm in Rosarito in Mexico, Baja California, Rosarito. It's a little bit south of Tijuana, maybe about 30 minutes or so. It's a
Okay,
nice
so
area. A
30
lot,
minutes
lot
south.
of Americans live here, retired people. Yeah.
Okay, that's what's up. And so you've been there for how long?
I've been here going on 10 years now. When I got
Okay,
deported, I lived in Tijuana for like 2 years. I was a supervisor for AT&T, and I was working there for a while. But we had some differences with management, and so I ended up basically going. You know how I used to work as a for supervisor. You remember? So I got some
yeah,
technical background there, and I actually ended up building my own clientele out here and started working at uh, um going to addresses and working with American customers. That helped me out a lot.
yeah. I bet you've always been industrious, bro. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hustling,
Well, hey,
hustling. That's
thanks.
that's from the street right there.
That's exactly no, exactly, bro. And I'm thankful that you agreed to jump on and I know
Yeah,
you are a very straight up
absolutely.
and just transparent person here, so I know I can ask you just about anything. And when I started
Yeah,
contemplating
definitely.
this particular topic, man, I wanted to get somebody like yourself who could just shoot straight, and that's the whole premise of this podcast series. Hence the reason why we dub it the Truth Booth. It meant just to
Yeah,
have some raw, uncut conversation
yeah,
about things that sometimes people don't want to
yeah.
talk about. Sometimes it's things that people just don't know. And I think this is one of those areas where you can lend some expertise and some insight about some things that people
Absolutely,
don't know
absolutely.
because of what you've been through. And so, before I get into the meat and potatoes of that particular part, though, I want to ask you a couple questions just to give listeners a little bit of a snapshot about who you are and how you grew up, etc. Because, like all of us, our past shapes us, right? Our background shapes us, etc. And so, where did you grow up? To start off with that,
I grew up
they got you, bro.
Central Valley of California, Hanford, considered north from North California is divided into two parts, southern and northerner, just like Baja California.
Oh, so we lost Tony for just a second. Like he said, somebody doesn't want us to have this conversation, but we're gonna have the conversation, and so I'm not gonna let it just drop there. In case you didn't catch that, Tony grew up in Hanford, California, and for those of you that are familiar with the area and whatnot, and so I wanted him to share that in particular because it definitely has um, some some credence to what we're going to get into here in just a second.
I'm
I
gonna
got your
be
back.
cutting off. It looks like I'm gonna be cutting off and on, but I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna give up here. If you could just hold me up a little bit, and then I'll come back into. But I don't understand what's going on here.
Yeah, no problem,
But
bro.
I
No,
paid my
yeah.
internet bill, so I don't know what's going on
Yeah, no, no, it's all
here.
good. I was just asking where you were from, and you were getting into letting us
Okay.
know where you're from and whatnot. So go ahead and say that again if you could.
Yeah, I was from Central California. It's in the middle of California. It's it's Central Valley. I mean, California is huge, but there's north and there's south. But there is actually a Central Valley, but it's considered part of the Northern California. But so it's near Fresno. That's basically where I grew up at, a little town called Hanford.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and if you could, I mean, what was that like living in Hanford? Like, talk to me a little bit about your home life and
Well,
school life, etc., community.
yeah. During my generation, being Mexican was not very cool. Now
Mm,
Mexicans being cool. Back then we used to work in the fields. You know what I mean?
yeah.
I remember one instance, like our summer break from school, we would be on the side of the freeway picking up walnuts. Stuff that people would try to, they would laugh. Hey, I seen you over here, and I would get upset, and I would, bully them. But being a Mexican in my generation was kind of, especially in California, when there's a lot of racism. we were barely starting to integrate into out of the fields and start studying, and the next generation started going to college and became regular jobs. So it was kind of the transition for me was kind of hard, because in school, for example, they would talk about Pancho Villa on the history, and he was
Mm-hmm.
dubbed like a bad guy. You know what I mean? So I felt
Mm,
kind of offended at the time. You know what I mean? But
sure.
I had to go with the flow. But I remember actually feeling ashamed when they used to speak about them going into Mexico and and conquering, and all the other stuff, taking Houston. Sam Houston was the president back of the Lone Star. All that history, it
Yeah.
kind of like went in contrast with being Mexican in California those days.
Mm, yeah.
So it was kind of
So
hard.
so you
Yeah.
yeah, so you would say the at the time the way that the era was, your culture was painted in a negative light that kind of dramatically impacted maybe your own view of yourself
Yeah.
and worldview of other people.
And Cesar Chavez had a lot to do with that too, out of Delano, when he had the immigration movement going to get them their insurance, and their in
Right.
case they're paid leave and all that stuff. That's the time that I grew up in. So a lot of people could understand that those were like the Martin Luther King era for the
Right.
African brothers. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it was kind of a sensitive time.
Right. Yeah. A lot of volatility between
Yeah.
different cultures that were clashing during the time. Yeah, it definitely was an interesting time in history. So to grow up during that part, I can imagine, what that would have been
Yeah.
like for you. Getting into a little bit of a more intimate space here with what I'm trying to get at and what I'm going to get at here. Talk to me a little bit about your family dynamic too. Like, I mean, how'd you grow up in the home? Who raised you, etc.?
My mom, she brought me from Mexico at 5 years old in arms. I mean, but my mom came from a background where her mom and her dad were cops. They're alcoholics, and the corruption in Mexico back in those days. It was just a tough upbringing for her. So she never really had a lot of love. So she never really knew how to give us that love. So, and then
Mm,
I never met my father. So she kind of like in a way she was frustrated from what had happened, and I took the blunt of most of the of that bad relationship. So when she remarried, I felt kind of like an outsider. I felt like I wasn't part of that family. You would kind of say as
mm,
a bastard child, even though I wasn't, but that's the way I felt.
sure.
I could relate
Yeah.
a lot to like what Tupac went through, because in a lot of his songs I could relate to what he went through, because I kind of went through the same thing. My sisters, different fathers, you know what I mean, and same scenario. I mean, no one's perfect, but yeah, I was taught that if I would receive B minuses, or I would get my ass whooped. I was a
Yeah.
straight A child, you know what I mean, because I was afraid of getting anything else, so I had to. You know what I mean?
Mm,
I finished second in the spelling bee in statewide in California, so you could get a picture of that. I studied it. I liked it.
mm,
You know what I mean? But
yeah.
but it was because I would get my ass whipped. You know,
Yeah.
so there was a kind of a pressure there. So I never really received love. So that's kind of what pushed me to the streets.
Yeah. So you're kind of ruled with an iron rod, really, and that kind of pushed you
Yeah,
in a
basically.
different direction.
Yeah,
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 I got you. Well, I want to kind of segue just for a second. I'm going to come back and circle on that in just a second because I think it's important for people to hear of that particular segment of your life, which I know we could deep dive
yeah,
a little bit
definitely.
further, but we're going to just tap on that for just a second. How
Okay.
your home life was,
Yes, sir.
volatile,
Okay.
right? You had a lot of chaos that was ensuing there, and that was an
Okay.
influential factor that caused you to step into the street life, which I want to get into in just a second. But I want to reflect for just a moment on how we crossed paths because I
Sounds
remember
good.
back in the day, I think it was around it was '01, I think, when I first met you, and you ended up living with me for a short period of time, and I just remember this little glimpse of nine
Yeah.
eleven when I woke up on 9/11 and you were sitting watching the TV in disbelief, and I think the first tower had just got hit, and you're like, "Yo, check this out. We're under attack." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" That was like a sci-fi movie
Yeah.
you were watching or
Go
something.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You remember
definitely. That
that?
was wow. I was like, wow. I remember that I had just got off work. I worked a double shift while I was living with you, because I wanted to get my wife and my kids to move to Boise. We were out of where you grew up at in Minidoka County,
Yeah.
in Rupert. So they were still back there. I was trying to save up so I can rent a place and bring them down here. And eventually that happened. But I remember that day when I got off work. I remember walking through the door, and I remember just everyone. Usually was a big ruckus, and everyone either hung over, or, a lot of noise from people partying. and
Sure.
I see everyone just crying and stuff, and I
Mm.
just was shell shocked. I was, and then you came out
Yeah.
of the hallway from your room, but it was unbelievable. Even to this day, it's unbelievable what had happened.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. No, it is. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I that's like a point in history and a point in time that I definitively remember when we crossed paths. And I know at the time we
Yeah,
didn't even really know each other at that point, but we
no,
did strike an
yeah,
affinity with one another, particularly because of music. And shortly after, and around
yeah,
that time frame, I had gotten into the production side of music, and I know you have been into music for a long time as well.
yeah.
And that's kind of how we ended up intersecting even after that time frame, right? And staying
Yeah, we
connected and
competed a
whatnot.
lot too. You know that we competed a lot, right?
Do you think
We
so?
competed a lot in the sense that we would go to those the Twin Falls charity for the computers. You showed up there, you know, what I mean, with Quiet Storm, and we ended up in certain little places at the same time, you know.
Uh-huh. I didn't think about it that
Yeah,
way.
it was cool.
Yeah.
And the music, I think the music is what brought us together because apart from, I'm a very serious person. I don't really have too many friends, and I remember talking with you, and you're like me, you speak from the heart, you speak what it is, and there's no in between bullshit, and and we just
Hmm.
clicked right away. I mean, we became really good friends. Even to the day, I consider you as maybe as one of the five friends that I don't have too many friends that I consider friends. You happen to be one of them
Hmm.
persons. I have a lot of respect for you. You know what I mean, because you've always kept it real. You know.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that a ton. And I know during that time frame, like, your life was kind of caught in a crossroads as well, because as we mentioned earlier, you grew up in a pretty interesting world, in a pretty interesting setting where you got involved in the streets and you were doing some things and getting involved with people that really you didn't shake, right? So during the time that I ran and met into you, you had already been married. I think maybe you had your second kid at the time, maybe, right? I think you had one at least. Um, and
Yeah.
so you already
Yeah.
were starting a family and
Yeah.
whatnot,
I was
but
trying to do the right thing, and I was trying to
right,
leave the past behind. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Definitely.
you're trying to leave the past behind,
I was trying to
exactly.
just clean my life up, but but the past will always come back. The past still
Mm,
comes back. I'm 51, gonna be
mm-hmm.
51 years old, and if I was to go to jail here in Mexico, because I'm a norteño, there's no, even though I don't agree with that anymore.
Hang tight, folks. See, we're just starting to warm up. So if you got a little glimpse of that piece, we see the little circle of whatever you call it, the internet trying to take us out, but we're not going anywhere. We're gonna stay strong, and we're gonna maintain, and we're gonna keep going. And we're gonna get this story out because the story is important. And as Tony was mentioning, he was trying to do the right thing during this season of life when we met. He was trying to do the right thing by getting his family together, moving him up here. I got your back, bro. And that transition of trying to get things right, working the double shifts and getting his family together and whatnot. And like you said, the past didn't leave him. The past came back to haunt him, if you would. And so, Tony, you cut out right when you were saying that um,
Yeah, yeah. If I was to go
something
to
about
like
the
prison here in
past leaving you
Mexico, I would.
behind.
Yeah, I mean the past will always come back. Even whatever choices you make in the past, there will be consequences. There's nothing you can do about that. If I was to go to
Yeah.
prison here in Mexico, I would have to be a norteño because there does exist gangs out here, even though
Mm-hmm.
I have friends that are sureños that I speak with, but that's a whole different life in prison. You know what I mean? I'm a norteño, and it's probably gonna go really bad for me because there's not really too many norteños out here. But it is what it is, and I will have to do what I have to do, even though I do not agree with that lifestyle any longer. But
Mm.
it's
I
part of
gotcha.
it's part of the. It is what it is, brother.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And that's kind of the crux of where I'm getting at here in just a second. So you mentioned you hit the streets, right? You ended up
Yeah,
joining from the jump. Then was it with Norteños that you ended up getting connected with from the get go?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We were friends. We were friends, and I wasn't even a gang at first. We were just from the
Mm-hmm.
neighborhood, and they had the similar problems that I had with I mean, we became friends, and then sooner or later I remember one of the older guys came out of the city, bro, you guys don't understand. I put red on, and that's
Mm.
we didn't really have much of a choice, but that's what happened. You know,
Mm. Mm. So how old were you when that was the
we're
case?
dubbed as norteños because in California you could be not affiliated, but you will have to click. You're not even involved.
Mm.
17. I was 17 years old. I was eager to go. Eager to go.
17 and eager to go. Huh.
Yeah.
So you said you didn't have
I
a
wanted.
choice. Oh, I'm waiting for you to come back. I'm telling y'all, folks, we're not gonna stop. We're gonna get through it because it's getting good. And there's some good stuff here we're gonna get into. So hang with me here. So a little bit of a recap again. So he said he was 17 and eager. Tony was 17 and eager to join the street life, uh, even though part of it appears to be that he was almost forced to jump into this lifestyle just because of the surrounding and the environment that he grew up in which you know you you are presented with that option as if it was an option, but it wasn't always an option, you could say. And so an interesting um, type of life if it were not to get involved in there. So let's see here. Well, I got some other people jumping in. Thank you for jumping in the comments, y'all. And you can keep on doing it. I see it. We're gonna, yeah, we'll play out some jams on the outro when we're getting it out. So thanks for jumping in there and saying, appreciate it, Leos. But we're gonna wait for homie to get back on here, and we'll continue kicking this off here. But 17 years old, it's hard to imagine, at 17 years old, and sometimes you hear of other people who end up jumping into this particular lifestyle even at a younger age than that, which is crazy to think about, but it happens, and it's actually pretty common. And knowing that at that age, like, you haven't even figured stuff out, right? Life is so complicated sometimes, and you add in the mixture there of a volatile home life and, maybe even the school life similar because it spills over, and not really knowing exactly who you are at that time frame, it just super convolutes what it is that your decision making skills would seem to be during that time and age. And so even being at 17 when he jumped on deck to join this particular lifestyle, it's hard to imagine being able to do that, and live through that and just walk through that. And so we're going to keep the conversation moving as I get him on here. So hang tight with me here as he's making his way back. Dun, 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 dun. Don't mind me trying to communicate with him a little bit here. So as you recall, if you recall, Tony's in or south of Baja California, and I see him coming on back right now. So here we go. There you are, brother. I
I'm
got
gonna
you
try my
back.
phone. See what happens.
Oh, there we go. Okay, you actually sound like you're a little better. At least I can hear you better. Cool. Can you hear me?
Yeah, my connection keeps going out, but I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah. It's all good, bro. It's all good. We'll figure it out. If we need to
Right
run
now,
it back
you're
in a
choppy
different way, we can
too.
do that too. Am I? Okay. I'll tell you what. I'm going to do this. If we could, I'm going to do this. I'm going to switch it up a little bit, and I'm going to throw a curveball at anybody here that's been jumping on listening. So thanks for listening, first of all, if you've been jumping in here. And I'm going to say this. This interview was meant to go and get streamed, but we're also going to put the audio portion of it on our podcast, which, if you haven't figured it out by now, it's called The Truth Booth, and you could stream it on any platforms that you stream your podcast at, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcast, etc. And so I'm going to jump off here, and I'm actually going to call Tony. We're going to just do it via audio, and I'm going to upload that this conversation, without the hiccups and whatnot. We're going to go ahead and upload that to our podcast channel, so make sure you check that out, and you can get the full scoop on it. You don't want to miss it. there's a big reason why we intended to do this and allow Tony the opportunity to really just open the book and be very transparent about the street life. And again, what they didn't tell you about it. When it seems so glamorous according to pop culture, movies and music, etc., there's a heavy price that some people pay. And Tony's one of those guys that he lived it, walked it, and he paid a heavy price for it. And I'm not going to spoil it because I want him to be able to tell that part of it and for him to be able to shed some light on what that means. And so come back, check out the episode on the podcast, wherever you stream your podcast, and I will catch you on that side very, very soon. All right.